A student is caught with drugs. In accordance with school policy, the student must comply with a mandatory 5-day suspension, along with the loss of various privileges. Philosophers Jeremy Bentham, John Rawls, and Immanuel Kant dissect the morality of the varying punishments as well as the morality of punishment at all.
In Radnor High School, there is an entirely prevalent drug culture. It is impossible to go a day at the school without seeing e-cigarettes or Juuls, so Radnor has 4 levels of misdemeanors and punishments. In order to curb the students' drug use, the school board classes varying levels of offenses from levels 2 to 4. The level of a punishment applied depends on the specific scenario. However, these philosophers will be discussing whether the punishment is fitting, and if not, how each student shall be punished.
So, a student is caught with drugs. Thoughts? Personally, it could be a lot worse. At the end, he isn't hurting anyone, is he?
I'm going to completely disagree with that. He's most definitely harming himself through the drug use, but he's also harming the school's reputations. Students fully know and understand that in using or possessing substances, we have every right to punish them. Meaning that what they're doing is wrong.
Also, before the school year had begun, they did sign to agree to obey the rules laid out in the student handbook that explicitly states that if a student is caught with drugs, that they must have a minimum 5-day suspension. They gave consent.
Okay, I understand where you're going with this, but you have to agree that sometimes rules aren't an exact translation of morality. So many of the grievances of history were legal, and yet morally they were so completely corrupt that it would have made no sense for them to be legal in the first place.
I completely agree. The students don't exactly have an option to not attend school, as they do live in the Radnor district. Then they must attend Radnor High School unless given the option to go to a private or boarding school. However, not everyone has that option. Before the school year even begins, the school already has power of the students by forcing them to sign this contract without any free will. This obvious imbalance in power between student and school already makes this literal contract immoral.
So then do you think it's wrong to punish the student for using or abusing drugs? Is it wrong to do anything here? Is it right to punish an illness? How can we know? When a student comes to the nurse saying that they have a headache, does the nurse cock a gun or does she give them ibuprofen? Why should the treatment be any different for addiction? The DSM-5 defines addiction as a primary chronic disease of brain, reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. All of this will impact someone's career as a student. To punish that would just be punitive. This is an illness, not a sin.
But is it the job of the school to treat addiction? Is it our responsibility to make sure that a child, who is, by the way, damaging our reputation, is that our job to treat them? There's a difference between a headache and a morphine addiction. We don't cure cancer here, do we? And when a child comes to school with mono, we don't coddle them and tell them we're okay. We send them home either to ride out their illness or to treat it. It's not exactly our responsibility to make sure they're okay for an illness that they themselves have caused.
Yes, however, the price between treating a headache and morphine addiction is very large. It is possible that the student will not be able to pay for this treatment. However, their economic status should not prevent them from getting help. So, yes, it is the school's job to help treat it.
Poverty should not be a part of the discussion here, unless we're talking about the worth as a student to the school. Drug dependence is a liability to the reputation of our school, as well as the abilities of the students. If they can't hold their own, then they are damaging us and themselves.
Well, if you want to talk about the worth of the student, then I guess we should talk about GPA.
Well, the grades of the student should probably not be affecting this. When judging if a person needs help or not, you don't lay back and, nestle up in a couch and decide whether it's worth it or not. You should help a person if you can, no matter what their circumstances are or who they are.
It doesn't really matter what I think, nor what either of you think. The GPA is what a student is worth to the system. It's what the system defines as the worth. That's why we have valedictorians. They're the best of the best in their respective academic circles, and they're treated better on paper because they are better. Why do you think it's the better students that are given scholarships? That's monetary value. They are legitimately given scholarships worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because of how valuable they could be to their colleges and our school.
Okay, I see what you mean, but students shouldn't be treated as numbers on a page. By just ranking them in order of their academic value, you completely ignore the value of a person. These scholarships are because they earned academic appreciation, not their individual value. You simply aren't taking into account the number of students dealing with extenuating circumstances. Chronic illnesses, mental health issues, rocky family lives, and especially substance abuse, especially in Radnor, can cause a student's own health to take priority over their academics. The worth of a student isn't as binary as you make it seem. You can't rank a person's value between numbers 1 and 4. The worth of a student, there are just so many factors, so many plates in the air that it seems immoral to use GPA here.
I completely agree. It is entirely possible that things out of the student's control have been affecting their academics both positively and negatively. If the student's family is more than financially stable, let's say, then the student is able to pay for more academic help, such as tutors, whereas a student of lower economic status would not be able to receive such a benefit. Alternatively, if a student must work to actually help sustain their family, it would take time away from said academics, thus resulting in a lower GPA. You just can't define a person based on GPA when so many other factors come into affect it.
I understand your argument here, but I think we should consider GPA. We at Radnor give students tons and tons of opportunities like the Math Center and peer tutoring, which is much more affordable than outside tutoring, to get their GPAs up. There is a deal between the high school and the students, in that they uphold our reputation. If a student is of more worth to the school, they should be forgiven for more. A 4.0 student brings far much more to the table than a 2.7 student, and while it may seem harsh, it's true. I feel as though both of you are looking at this too emotionally.
So then you believe that because a student has a higher GPA, they should be held to a lower moral standard? How is that any different from being exempt from certain crimes due to a high net worth?
It is also impossible to state that a higher GPA means more brought to the table. If outside factors are affecting their academics and prohibiting them from reaching their potential, you can't just plainly state that they don't have enough worth. Students with higher GPA could only have such because of their upbringing, which isn't exactly fair now, is it?
Alright, well, let's talk about the punishment. In addition to their academic abilities, the 4.0 student is also involved in music programs, plays, and clubs. He has a heavy attachment to the school society. While this 2.7 student is unable to participate in any extracurricular, while the 2.7 student, because of their grades and failing grades, are unable to participate in any extracurricular activities. Say each one of them is caught vaping. It only means that in being suspended and being banned from school activities, the 4.0 student would suffer much, much more. Also, these punishments being on their respective records is more likely to tarnish the bright future of the 4.0, while probably not doing much to the 2.7 average.
One simply can't assume that because an individual is not involved in school extracurriculars that he's not involved in his personal circle. You can be involved in so many plays and clubs and musical extracurriculars but still not have value as a person. And even so, these connections shouldn't have an effect on the punishment.
Also, once again, it may be the factor of money that is playing into the students' lack of participation in extracurricular activities. Sports, music, and clubs all cost money. You're only rewarding the 4.0 student because they have more money?
Okay, we've all said our piece about worth as a student. Now let's keep discussing about the charge. How should the punishment differ between a student caught dealing versus the student we were talking about who was caught with only possessing drugs?
I mean, honestly, I don't really think students should be harmed for possessing. They should be educated on why they're harming themselves. They don't understand that, what they're doing will impact them in the future, either via illness or by dependency. As I said before, you shouldn't punish an illness, you should just treat it. If you treat it, it goes away. If you punishment, students just learn that it's not right, but they will keep on doing it. That being said, I fully and utterly believe that students should be severely punished for dealing. Even though a drug culture is all-encompassing, it also takes advantage of the pain of others. It manipulates it.
Well, we all know I disagree with your idea on punishment with possessing, but I completely agree. Dealing is completely immoral and should be punished a lot more severely than only possessing.
Well, when a dealer and customer exchange product and money, they both enter into a contract. It's not explicitly said, of course, but both sides understand their side of the exchange. The dealer will leave with more money and the customer with drugs. Yes, it does affect the student receiving, however, that student does understand the effects. As in Radnor High School, I know for a fact, students have been taught many times over about the different effects of different drugs. You can't say that they were unaware of these effects when they were taught about it many times over.
I understand that you believe that it's morally neutral to exploit an existing market, but by dealing, you just exacerbate the problem.
Well, like I said before, there could be problems on both sides. The economic status of the student's family can play a major factor in what they do at school. It's entirely possible that the student is dealing to help pay for things at home, such as food, heat, rent. Are you really going to punish a student because of their financial stability?
His financial status and motive doesn't factor into the fact that he's giving out drugs. The amount of people buying and using these drugs is in no way something that is related to the fact that he's doing it because he needs money. He's a piece in the machine that is creating addicts and people who suffer. I'm not punishing the student for being poor. I'm punishing them for using their financial status as an excuse to spread these harmful substances to the masses.
While I can see where you're going with this, we should definitely still take into account the reason for a student dealing. It's often not in their control what their economic status is, and by not allowing them to work for that, it just hurts the student more. Maybe we could allow the student to have a job or something like that, but the point being is that often this isn't something in their control, just like addiction.
So it seems we generally agree on the offenses and that punishment should be given out. However, the specifics in doing so is going to be conflicting to each side. We all see different worths in people and what they're doing wrong.